right, Angus, I'm really excited to have you here today, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I am just grabbed something to eat real quick right before this call. I got myself a little pineapple flavored water, and I'm ready to rock.
There we go. I love it. That sounds super refreshing, by the way.
It
Me
is.
and me and my wife, we've been on a big like juicing game lately.
Hmm.
Pineapple's the number one right there, man. It's super hydrating, so good for you.
Hmm.
Um, I want to kick it off, right? Because you have had a front row seat on both sides of the AI adoption story, both with executives you've worked with, but also like large clients that you've worked with as well, and coaching executives around how do I leverage these, but then still, save my authentic self, right? Because I think that's the big challenge today is AI is unlocking more productivity, but there's also the concern around it is like, well, when do we actually respect our own time of realizing that we can do the same amount in less time, but my fear is now we're going to be expected to do more. And so with your experience, like what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you see both in AI and sales today?
Well, I think the biggest piece is the fact that we have this mentality that we have to work harder. Full stop. And when AI is giving us the opportunity to actually work smarter, so to the same context that you were just saying, is we have to learn all the changes. All AI is not going anywhere. It's only getting to have a firmer hold on everything that we have at our disposal. And information is a commodity. It's free now. So every marketer, every salesperson, every expert in the space has access to the exact same information that you do. And so we have to think very differently. Number one is how do we stay on top of this? How do we learn the space? And I would say use AI to learn AI, meaning you can take some of the information of a context that you're trying to understand and put it into, say, Notebook LM and have it read it to you like a podcast. So when you're out for a walk or you're doing the dishes, you can be learning in a way that's more in line with your life versus you stuck for just another hour in front of your screen. Like learning to integrate into your life is one piece, and the number two is how do you think differently? Because the only differentiator now is not the information; it's the execution, it's the implementation. How you're putting that out into a tech forward, sales leader requires you to think with all these different hats on. And so again, if our thinking is I have to work harder, you're only going to exhaust yourself. You're going to burn the candle on both ends versus how can I use the same technology that's helping me be more effective in messaging, how effective into outreach, and to also helping me manage and shape my life in a smart way too. Because at the end of the day, our goal here is to use this technology to be more impactful and not more caught in the chaos. It's supposed to serve us. And I think the last piece is to understand that there is a requirement for us, and this might sound counterintuitive, to be more human in order for us to use this technology.
Dig into that one a little bit because I agree with you. I want to hear
Mm.
more.
So let's talk self-awareness. So in the same way that you protect your time, protect your energy, those are the two things you can't get back, time and energy. Right? So can you leverage this technology in such a way that it serves so that you have more time and more energy to do what you need to do? Second of all is you have a team that's trying to manage all this same crazy just in the same way you are. And are you putting more attention into developing leadership within your team? Are you taking time to listen? Are you taking time to care? And so this now is an exercise of humanity with the people that are on our team within our company. And then furthermore, what does it look like for your customer? Like, how do you get into their shoes more effectively? You can leverage this technology to see through their lens, to see their pain, to see the things that they're going through. But it's going to take your humanity in order to have the compassion and the empathy to serve them better, to give them the kinds of things that are going to help them be more effective at what they do, for them to have the tools or the product or the service for them to be optimized for this changing world.
I love that. I think it makes me think of two things, and I completely agree with you. I think AI, when used the right way, is about augmenting humans, right? And actually
Yeah.
unlocking more of our capabilities and our strengths. I think a great example is note takers, right? You were talking about the notebook LLM, but like even note takers, like the best skill in sales is active listening. But forever, we weren't able to actually use that because we were too focused on, am I taking the right notes? Am I asking the right questions? Now, before we jump into, because I want to understand a little bit more about you and how you got here, right? Of like figuring out this like balance. But real quick for the audience, like you talked about Notebook LM. What are some of your favorite tools that have actually helped you unlock your productivity and also find more balance because of it?
Yeah, so we've built some systems just using ChatGPT, going in and building our own custom models, our custom GPTs that now know my voice, know my tone, know my philosophy and my ethos. And we actually have built using make.com as an engine for us to be able to just put in a prompt and say, hey, here's a topic we want to talk about this week for our newsletter. And suddenly that prompt goes into our knowledge basis, and it crafts an article. And from that article, then it's printed into a PDF. That PDF then fires off to Claude. Claude knows my voice, can write in my tone and my style, and so then it'll spit out another version of that same newsletter, but more in light of the way that I would actually talk. And then that fires off to our Slack and says to either my VA or my operations and says, hey, this is ready for review. And then we put human eyes on it. So then we can actually make the last tweaks, and then we can actually throw that up into active campaign for it to get scheduled to be mailed and to be shaped the way that it needs to look. And so it's a process that takes, just minutes, which used to take hours. And so now we're building more and more systems of automation into our business to save me time. Second of all, I would say the connection of when a new client comes in, all that's now automated. And we've built AI tools. For instance, we have a tool in our tool belt called the 10-minute motivator, which is what we use for all of our clients in order to set their mind into a place of power before they jump on a sales call, before they have that big meeting, before they have that pitch, to put them in a place of what we call the inner badass, a place that they feel confident and ready to go. So their mental state is just as prepared as the environment they're creating for their conversation. We've got that thing now dialed into AI to where you can put in just a couple of answers to these questions that we have. And then that kicks into gear and writes this narrative, this powerful narrative of how you see yourself. And that becomes the 10-minute motivator, all done with AI.
I love that. It's like the 2025 version of do your Superman pose before you join that call. Like that's what I grew up on was like do the Superman pose. It was one of the reasons I had a standing desk forever is because I would make sure I was always standing whenever I was presenting to an audience because of those small things, right? I love that you did that. What I'm curious, what tool are y'all using to orchestrate that, right? Because I think you hit a big one. A lot of people are still talking about prompts, but the next piece is actually around building agents, which is really what you just described. Do you have any specific tool y'all using? Are y'all using or what are y'all using, if you don't mind me asking?
We're just using make.com and then Zapier. So, the zaps fire it off into one, fires it off to the other, and then those all connect. And make is, does some of its own actions in that context. So the whole sequence put together, I let the team do that part. I don't understand all of it fully. I just know that I was instrumental into building the prompts. And that's where I put all my energy, is because I know how to shape these words in a way that connects. And just to kind of nerd out a little bit, when you're talking about these neurons in our brain, all of it's based on stories we tell ourselves. And we build these stories on things from our past or our experiences, or maybe you've gotten told no multiple times and you're just waiting for that yes, but in your mind, it's almost like you're just waiting for the shoe to drop. And so you can get into a funk or a dry spell in your sales, cycle and feel like you're a piece of crap, and we can change that because all that's built on the story. And so the way that we do some of our prompting is to actually connect people to this truth that they want as a reality in their life and match that with an emotion. In other words, um, money loves me and is my friend. That makes me feel like I never have to worry about where my bills are going to get paid or how my family's be cared for. And just a simple line like that helps you set a different belief system into motion. You know, you might think like every no is to get me to a yes. That makes me feel confident in control of my future and my destiny. You know,
It's
these kinds of prompts are things we don't give the mental mechanics the proper strategic uh, prowess that it deserves because it runs our lives. And whether we're in leadership or whether we're in sales, it is a key component that becomes our differentiating, uh, mechanism. It also becomes our power tool, and it becomes our strategic edge. Is because when you have control of your mind, you have control of how you show up in the world, and that becomes influence and impact. And most people never tap into that. They do everything by the gut. They do everything by, circumstance. They do everything by, by guess and by golly. But if you get strategic, you can become really powerful.
It's like I feel like I just watched a little bit of a mini series just now with you saying that of The Secret, the good old law of attraction,
Yeah.
right there, man. Um,
Yeah.
how did you get here? Right? Like tell us a little bit about your story, because one of the things I love about talking with you is there's this confidence, but yet also there's just like this peace, which makes having conversation with you very easy. And so tell us about your journey that got you here.
Yeah. So a lot of that piece, confidence, security, whatever, is a product of having life kick the crap out of you a number of times. You know, when you're young and dumb and you've got some chutzpah, you've got that, that swagger, and you come out the gates and you think in our culture that if we're loud and we're proud, that we're powerful. And what you come to learn is that everyone around you is faking it. Everyone around you is just doing the best they can with what they got. And the more you get into this thing of life, the more settled and secure you can get. It's like, hey, who am I? And so my story started with the first business that I started. I was 27, I think, 28. And I did some music festivals and I did a bunch of concerts, and I fronted as a nonprofit organization that did arts education for young people. And one of those music festivals, we had thunder showers. We lost $72,000 in one weekend. And underneath the weight of that debt for our little organization, that was a massive, massive hit. And I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to delegate. I didn't know how to navigate that whole thing. So I did what, I said, other people do, is I just worked harder. I just put all that responsibility on my back, and I said, I'm going to prove to everyone I can turn this ship around. And so that turned into, 70, 80, 90-hour work weeks. My wife grew to despise me, and she's like, why don't you just quit? Go get a regular job. And I wanted to prove her wrong. And here comes my arrogance and my pride, my ego, my narcissism. And I started to cope, and it started with drinking, and it started with porn. And then I started sleeping around. I blew up my marriage. I blew up the business, and I blew up my sense of self. And it was through that experience that I ended up 2003. I was underneath my Christmas tree and weeping, contemplating how I was going to take my life. And I heard this voice that said, we're not done here yet. And that next week I enrolled in counseling, and I started to learn about human behavior and psychology and emotional intelligence and all these different things that I didn't know anything about before. And it opened my eyes of how life actually works and how I was the product of my problems, not anyone else. I couldn't blame them. It was me. I was creating this chaos. And flash forward a decade later, I was running an innovation association for Fortune 500 brands. A friend of mine had teamed up. He was a data analytics guy. I was the people side. And suddenly I'm working with Walmart and Coca-Cola and Disney, BMW, and all these massive brands, 74 different companies. And I had over 200 seats in this association filled. And while I'd be talking with these high-level executives, I started to see some of the same patterns in the pressures they were facing in their companies around innovation. And every great idea they had was forced with resistance or an organization that felt threatened by their concept. And I started speaking to that in some of my clients. And one day, one of them said, Angus, you'd make a great coach. And I was like, thank you. I didn't quite know what that meant at the time. And then a few weeks later, I found this book. I was going on vacation to Hawaii. In fact, I have the book right here called The Prosperous Coach. And I started reading it and realized, oh my gosh, I think this is what I'm called to do. And so 2016, I started my first coaching client. And I've worked with startup SaaS founders. I've worked with corporate executives. I've worked with speakers, and I've worked with coaches. And all of it, I don't care if you're at $100 million health IT company that you founded, own 70% of the company you're operating, the CTO and the CFO. That was one of my clients, control freak. And when he let go of all that, suddenly he just took a role in the board, hired those 2 roles out to somebody else, and got his life back. And now he can travel the world and be with his kids. And it could be at that high level, or it's, the entrepreneur, the solopreneur who's running, 6 figures. All of it comes down to those belief systems, how we see ourselves, how we show up in the world. And that's the core of everything that we do in our lives. So why don't we put more attention on it?
I mean, I agree. It's one, I appreciate your vulnerability and your transparency in this. I can relate. I know me and you have had conversations offline about this. I mean, what you just explained, I went through the same exact thing. It's kind of, I feel like once you got out of it, it's like you handed the baton to me, because my breakdown was 2019, or it's 2018 was when it happened. And it was the same thing. I took on way too much as a founder. Rather than reading the writing on the wall, it was my ego and my pride of like, I can do this. I can prove people wrong. I can prove people wrong. Even though that voice in the back of my head was like, dude, cut your losses, and like, just, it's okay. Right. We mess up. And it was finally like, you hit that sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Like that's when you actually hit that rock bottom. And I had that voice in my head as well. And I did the same thing, went and got help, went and got counseling, changed my life completely. Right. It's the red light that turned out to be one of the best green lights in my life. And it's like with people like yourself that I can relate with, who have had similar journeys. I'm like, it's the club that nobody wants to be a part of, but it's a pretty freaking badass club when you meet people who actually went through that process and came out on the other end. So I love that. Like, I want to talk about self-awareness, right? Because you kept talking about that, like releasing your identity, and you've called self-awareness as like the gateway drug to personal development, right? So like in an AI-driven sales environment, like how does self-awareness become a competitive advantage?
Take your sales conversations, take the transcripts, put it into AI, and specifically ask it, where am I not being self-aware? Where am I not using emotional intelligence? What am I missing about what my client is sharing with me, even if they're not using the words? And it will start to show you ways of observing the conversations you're having. One of the tools we use inside of our coaching is called the Enneagram. And if you're familiar with like Myers-Briggs and DISC profile, Colby index, etc., this is one of the few that's based on emotional quotient. How you get motivated to move towards something or motivated to move away from something. And it's one thing to learn like where you are on that scale. And there's these 9 different numbers, and they have these different descriptions. I won't nerd out on it too much, but most people do it and then just find out about themselves. I'm like, oh, see, I'm a 3-wing too. This is just the way I am. And they lock themselves into a box. And one of the things I say, no, just because you learned about yourself, that's just a preference. But character can always override preference. So depending on who's in front of you, whoever you're talking to or presenting yourself to, and you know this as a salesperson, by the way, most salespeople are 3-wing 2s. They're like these chameleons, or they're 2-wing 3. They have this empathic way to sense the room and become who they need to become according to the person that's in front of them. They just naturally do that. And what's most important is not knowing that about yourself. What's most important is knowing about how it's received. So it's incumbent upon you to learn those other profiles so that you can read the room. Like, who's this person I'm talking to? And then have some data in your head. It's like, oh, this is why I feel compelled, or my intuition's guiding me in this to speak this way, because ultimately communication isn't saying what you want to say in the way you want to say it. The most powerful communication is saying what you want to say in the way the other person can receive it. And without emotional intelligence, without that kind of skill set, your words will fall flat. Your words will offend. Your words will distract, because you're trying to say things in the way you want to say it. And I live in Portugal, and people here speak Portuguese. And when you don't speak Portuguese, you struggle. And when I was in the United States and I talked to somebody who was from a foreign country, I would observe people around. It's like, don't you understand me? And they would speak louder, more elevated, trying to force the conversation. I have a completely different opinion of that now, living here where I don't know the language, and I'm like totally, humbled, and like I eat my words all the time. I'm like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. And my empathy now for someone who enters a country where they don't speak the language is that same way. Well, when you're a leader and you're trying to force an agenda on someone or trying to guide them in something, and all you do is loud and bold, you're not getting the results that you want. And oftentimes you're actually getting opposite results. Whereas if you have this emotional intelligence, that high IQ or EQ, suddenly you're communicating in a way that person goes, oh, I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel understood. Now you have real communication.
That was powerful. I couldn't agree more, because I think it is one of the things that has actually unlocked, I would say, one of my powers with AI, because I know talking person to person, I'm great. If you ask me though to like write that down in a well-structured way, I'm an idea person. And if you ask me to put it down in a structured way for you to digest it, 9 times out of 10, that's not going to happen. AI has really unlocked my ability to like give it like my brain dump and then be like, hey, help me organize this, right? And actually like do it in a better way. And so I have 2 questions for you from that, because the EQ side is so important. And I think there's a lot of people are like, oh, like AI is going to remove that EQ side of people. I'm like, I think so. Yes, if you use it the wrong way. And so 2 questions I have is, what are some of the reactions that you're getting working with executives and sellers? Because what I'm hearing you say is that AI is actually cutting through the noise and making us either accept it or push back against it even harder. What has that been like ever since you started introducing AI and like helping that from a coaching perspective?
Well, I'll start by saying this. The teams that are crushing it with AI aren't just using better tools or prompts. They're building better humans who can be clearer, who can be calmer, and who can make faster decisions. Because AI can help you see through all the noise, can help you see through all the clutter. Like you were saying, taking, your words and putting them into a chat GPT or whatever learning model that's best. I like Claude for my writing. So I'll give a shout out to that. But suddenly now your words can be put into a way that actually communicate more effectively, more clearly what you want to say. But then the other part of this is that, I would say that AI, that stack is only as effective as your emotional stack. Meaning, the stuff that I coach is like the inner software, the inner operating system, if you will. And that's your identity, and that's your beliefs, and that's your resilience. And when you talk about the rapid transformation we're in, and just to paint a picture, from like 1890 to 1920, we experienced the industrial revolution, where we brought in cars, steam engines, planes, electricity. There was so much dynamic brought into the world, and jobs shifted, and people went from the farms into the cities. Like there was so much transformation, it made your head spin. And now today, that same 30 years is being condensed to about three years. The rapid adoption that is available to people is only by choice, whether you choose to embrace this and get in front of it, or you're going to get left behind. And that's not a threat. It's an opportunity. But if you don't have the identity of someone who's willing to be flexible, pliable, to let go of old ways and old standards, old belief systems, all that old stuff, and can't change and move yourself to new beliefs, new ways of possibilities, new ways of seeing yourself, new ways of iterating, new ways of innovating, or the resilience to be able to like have the tenacity to stick at the game, to push through the resistance, to push through the pain, then you're going to be left behind and you're going to be sitting here holding the bag saying, what did I just miss? These are the things that we're instilling in all of our clients, is to be able to have this capacity for personal transformation as the basis of their career transformation.
Damn. I just want to say that was powerful. I'm the same way, by the way. Claude is my favorite, but I do have ChatGPT, I have Perplexity, I have Claude, I have all of it.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing? This is a great little nugget.
Yeah.
I would say like AI optimizes processes, but mindset optimizes potential. You can have the process, but you can't implement, you can't activate, you can't bring it into a reality. Mm-hmm. And you need this kind of thinking, this kind of thought process, this kind of EQ in order to make it so.
So I want to double down on that, right, for our listeners, because I think obviously there's so much that can be unpacked from that powerful statement you just made. If there's a rep that's listening to this, what I'm hearing you say is that AI is not powerful until you actually understand yourself, right? Because then you can actually use AI to be the proper co-pilot that allows you to be the pilot. And so what are some tips that you would give to somebody listening of like a couple of things that they could do on their own to try to figure out that self-awareness before being pushed in? Because that is one thing I think is happening right now, is people are not given the education or the awareness around how to leverage it the right way. And I think you make a really good point, is that's something I did when building out a lot of my bots or agents, was like, I wanted to make sure is my authentic self. And so I had it like scrape my LinkedIn posts, scrape articles that I've written, like everything. But what's some things that you would share with the audience around like some reflection they can do on the self-awareness that will help them unlock more of their potential, and then even unlock more when they leverage AI with that?
So here's the reality. If you are not in touch with yourself first, it doesn't matter what AI stuff you put out there. You know, you can put out all of the information, like you were saying, you scrape off your LinkedIn, you can, pull some of your conversation transcripts, put that all in the AI, and that will give you a degree of content that it will spit out. However, like we've observed so many times, is that people put the very first thing that AI gives them and says, hey, this is me. And what we see are all those like, am hyphens or whatever those things are called. And we see, the same kind of terminology where suddenly you're talking about the tapestry of and the journey through and like all this like overly flowery stuff. We're like, what? That doesn't even sound like me. But the novice, the person who doesn't have the self-awareness, thinks, oh my God, I've never written like that before in my life. That's so great. And anyone who's been around the block reads that and goes, this junior, wannabe is putting out trash. And you just get put off to the wayside, versus having that emotional intelligence to then come in and say, hey, that's not exactly how I say things. I don't use emoticons. I don't use those damn big hyphens. I like ... Use that instead. And you start training the model to communicate in the way that you communicate. But here's the rub, and this is like the underlying thing. The people that do best with AI are proven incredible communicators. If you're not a good communicator in life, the stuff you put into AI is going to be trash. You have to learn how to communicate clearly and effectively with great expectations in real life to be able to do it through AI. And I would say maybe vice versa. The more you do it AI, maybe it will help you be better with your colleagues, possibly. But the communication factor of being clear to actually educate the model on what you're trying to get out of it is critical. So if you can't communicate in real life, you don't have that emotional intelligence, you're going to screw it up. Second of all, if you can't observe what's already written and come back and change it and modify it to make it feel more authentic, then you're going to lose. Like all these different things require you to pay attention to who you are and how you want to come out, how you want to show up in the world. And lastly, I would say, as you're writing, the things that you write have to matter for someone else. If you're just writing to be smart, to think smart, to use a bunch of data and drop a bunch of, buzzwords, it's the same thing we've observed in every other piece of media. And if you, again, someone gave you a new tool and you're like, oh my God, and you treat it like a toy, and you will get toy results. But if you take that tool and you treat it like a tool and have the emotional intelligence, how to be careful with a chainsaw, how to be careful with a ripsaw, how to be careful with, any other dangerous or powerful, mechanism, then that tool becomes a tool and is powerful.
I love that. I think one thing you hit on, and I want to give this to the listeners because this is what helped me. I call it prompt stacking. Mm-hmm. So to your point around, because it is with AI, it's garbage in, garbage out. And so what I have taught a lot of my reps is I'm like, use AI to teach you on what prompt to write, and then use that prompt to actually figure out what you're trying to figure out. Because that's what AI is great at, is saying, hey, I think you're trying to do this, and then tweak it. I think the other side that you're calling out, and this is the problem in most technology adoption or new innovation, is AI is not a silver bullet. It will never be a silver bullet, and we have to stop thinking of it as a silver bullet. I think you make a really good point, because in my view, and maybe I'm wrong, I'd love to get your thoughts, those who lack self-awareness are the ones who are probably afraid that their job is going to get taken. Those who have the self-awareness now realize that they can 10x themselves without having to 10x the effort to still be very powerful and impactful. At least that's been my take as a leader, because it's unlocked me to be able to move faster. I'll give you one real quick example. Monthly reporting, right? When we look at our monthly overview of revenue, I used to spend more time with my RevOps team in doing the analysis, and then we wouldn't spend much time on the actual strategy and execution. Well, now we actually have built an agent that we've trained with our data to say, generate our results for the month. And it generates the summary for us. And then we now are spending 2 hours on discussion on strategy and execution. Those are the small things where it's I love that we got that time back to reinvest in the things that matter.
I want to kind of underscore something, kind of push back, kind of underscore-ish.
Yeah.
That resistance to AI, it's not, like you said, it's not about the tech. I would say it's about the identity. And people aren't scared necessarily that AI is going to replace them. For whatever reason, they're going to have some sort of arrogance or narcissism in their human structure that they're going to think, oh, I got this, especially in sales, right? There's going to be this little bit of swagger. What they're scared of is becoming irrelevant. When they realize that their role doesn't matter, that's when things hit the fan. And as a company, you have to understand that your enablement programs, you've got to get focused on what's the real issue. It's not about creating more features and more things and more, expectations and more whatever. It's about permission. People in this season need permission to be able to fail, to be able to experiment, to be able to try. And sales teams in particular need to rewire from a threatened segment of the company into an empowered part of the company. And when that changes, the company changes. And so there's where more emotional intelligence has to be administered into leadership within these companies. You've got to give people permission.
How do you do that though? Right? Because at the end of the day, especially in sales, you still have to perform. We still have to drive
Mm-hmm.
results. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just challenging this because I want to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts. Is like,
Yeah.
I'm going to get great in theory.
Yeah.
How do we actually do this in
Yeah.
practice? Which is probably a common
Yeah.
question you get.
Yeah. So again, I'm always, going to take a little bit of contrarian, and the reality is that leadership, if they take on like what's our quarterly goals, especially in a large organization, like there has to be a little bit of grace that we are in completely new territory. And if you have fear of change, that's natural. That's normal. Like, but it's always changing. So we have to get comfortable with that. And as a leader, when you anchor to a why, Simon Sinek, obviously famous for this, is connect to the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we embracing this new technology? Why are we trying to get in front of our competitors? Like that's the biggest component here. And once you unlock that follow through, like we are committed to figuring this out. That's the kind of mindset that will move from just a command to a coaching, where leadership is helping to coach your team members to pick up on this stuff faster, to integrate more. I just got done talking with a leader from a company. Now, their team's only 20 people, but he made it an AI first thought process in their culture. Like anything that you're doing, always be thinking AI first. Like, how can I use AI to streamline this? How can I use AI to make this better, to refine this? And when we build a culture like that within a company with this kind of permission, then suddenly people like don't feel the pressure of trying to get it right, and instead they move to a performance of I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to take us to a new height. I'm going to bring my creativity. I'm going to bring my best self. That's when the culture has to become more human in order for us to get to where we want to go in this technology.
So if I'm imagine as a sales leader, and I'm even going as much as a frontline sales manager, sales leader, right? Like, mm-hmm. how do I? What are some of the signs I should look for to spot the potential resistance, and then how do I go about addressing that resistance?
Well, first of all, is this person self-aware? Is this person paying attention to how they're showing up? These are all some of the kind of external observable factors. Do they shrink back during team meetings? Are they getting more quiet or more recluse? Are they not responding as fast as what they used to? All those are symptoms. Those are symptoms when the fear is louder than the possibilities. Their level of faith, their level of belief, their level of audacity and possibility is waned. And in that, they're moving to a place of shrinking and scarcity instead of opportunity and possibility.
I want to piggyback on that, right? Because you mm-hmm. talked about opportunity, and then you also talked about the client you're working with about creating an AI first culture, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that's critical. Is we went in this conversation from the individual. Now, obviously, as a revenue leader, sales leader, or a leader in general, is you have to get the people who follow you to also want to do that. And so. Yeah. What are some of like maybe 3, maybe there's more, but like what are some of the core mindset shifts that are required for leaders who are wanting or actually managing AI augmented sales teams? What are some of the mindset shifts that they have to start first besides the self-awareness? But what are some of the shifts that they also need to make in their mentality?
So let's go back to the being more human, right? Culture. Like, what's the culture you're creating? And that is a culture of AI first. We can say that's one tenet. Another tenet is, ask for help. You don't have to do this by yourself. I got you. And so as a leader, I can be a coach. As a leader, I can be a guide, right? And furthermore, that human level, in that same level of what we were talking about, vulnerability, transparency, is like, hey, I ain't been down this road either. Like, I'm figuring this shit out just like you are. Like, let's figure it out together. And having an open context in the same, like, way that you would have a stand up every week. It's like, let's come in and say, what tools are working? What's not working? Hey, what are you experimenting with? What is the prompts you're using to build out some of your follow-up email sequences? All that is creating this culture, right? I say that's number one, is you have to even double down on culture. What's the old saying? Culture eats code for breakfast, right? The second thing I would say is, especially in this day and age, trust is a waning commodity. It's a very difficult thing for people to trust their teams, trust their leadership, trust their companies, because they're watching all their peers or friends or colleagues getting laid off by the droves. They're seeing AI, disruption in massive ways. And so all the more important for leadership to be in this place of support and not surveillance. For them to be in a place where they can model that transparency, again, that adaptability, that flexibility, and create a vision. Most people, and this goes back to what I was saying before about that Spice Girl principle, like, tell me what you want, what you really, really want. If you're not giving me a vision of where we're going with this, with our company, with our, our sales numbers or whatever, the vision has to be so powerful that it will transform you. Like, it's gotta, like, what I don't know if you've read the books, 10x is easier than 2x. Like, it's gotta be something that causes you to step into expansion. And with AI, it's like, what better time can we now change our mindset into this level of expansion? Like, this gives us the opportunity to become someone different, to be a different kind of leader, to become a different sales, master. And I have to take on that mindset, right? And so part of this vision as well, if that vision is so like palpable and so powerful, it will also attract the A players. It becomes a talent magnet when you have a powerful vision. And third, I would say that vision also compels people to want to show up with their best selves. Because if they have shared destiny, they show up very differently. They buy into the vision. They give ownership to that cause, right? Those are some of the things that come to me right off the top of my head. And building these teams that aren't afraid to reinvent themselves, I think that's kind of the foundation for AI fluency.
You hit a couple of words that I want to double down on because I completely agree with you. And I think as you were talking, it made me think, it's like, oh, I almost need to put myself back as like I just started this new role as a leader at this new company. Mm-hmm. And why I say that, I believe a couple of things. There's two core things I think that makes great leaders. Thing number one is you have to show it before you can coach it, and then before you can make it accountable. Mm-hmm. And I think that is one of my fears right now, is like some companies are just like, hey, here's AI. I'm going to throw it at you. Go figure it out. But like, I'm still going to create the culture of like nothing but accountability. Right. And I think the other one is you talked about buy-in and the word respect. And I think where for leaders to actually really get people to be into this, we have to realize that we have to also first get buy-in before we get the respect, before we get the trust. There is a process to this as well, right? And like, I think that's how we create that psychological safety and that culture that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I want to go to the future for a little bit because we have a couple of minutes left before we wrap this up. And so I don't even know what this answer is. I might even just say 12 months. At first I'm like, in 5 years, what do you see like an elite sales team looks like? I'm like, I have no clue. But in the future, like, what will separate elite sales performers from average ones in an AI dominated landscape?
It's a great question. I would say it's not about the tools. And I would even say on the opposite side of that equation, I don't think it's about being fearless. I think the future is for those who learn to integrate, to align, and those that perhaps hold like data in one hand and a level of self-trust in the other. Where they believe that they're capable of figuring things out. They believe that they can build the things that are in their heart to build, that they can have the kind of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and all these other things we've been talking about to such a degree that they embody that reality. And then they can implement with all the tools, because the team is going to require a different form of leadership. Mm-hmm. The tools are just tools. The tools will always be tools. The tools are nothing but tools. Now, these are more powerful tools, but they're still tools. And it takes a human in order to implement those tools in the ways that are necessary to get the results that are desired.
So with that human piece, what advice would you give to a sales leader who's feeling overwhelmed by this pace of AI advancement right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me slip you my business card and let me talk to you about... but in sincerity is, it is what I do. And it's really about redefining priorities. What is enough? What do I want? And who must I become?
Love that. Because
at the end of the day, the things that are going to put us in question is, do I deserve, am I worthy, or do I have what it takes? That's every human's Achilles heel. You can make a lot of money and then you're like, am I worthy of making this money? And you'll find some way to sabotage and lose it all, right? You can think, oh, I've got this big mandate, I got to get out there. And then that question, that little gremlin comes in is, do you have what it takes? Right? And then you'll find a way to sabotage. All these different things require us to actually work on me. And to get to where we want to go, I don't think anybody's ready for the level of somatic, energetic, emotional, and psychological requirements for what's coming next. And I believe that those that dial into their central nervous system are going to be the most powerful people in the future. You cannot have this rate of change and the rate of information that's being thrown at us and not come out normal without being intentional. You have to protect your white, mushy stuff in your skull. And if you're not protecting your heart and your head, you're going to get lost in the sauce really easy. You get easily agitated. Imagine all the AI that's coming out now, and then multiply that in news cycles. Multiply that in the next, political season. Multiply that for everything, every time some war breaks out. Multiply that for all the things that we are surrounded by is built around agitation and heightened response of fear and flight. And so if you aren't dialing into this emotional quotient, this nervous system, you're going to get distracted easily, and your resilience level is going to be very low.
I just had a full circle moment, which is why I'm smiling, because I'm actually this weekend, while I was working out in the yard, audiobooks are my thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to Gary John Bishop right now, his book, Stop Doing That Shit. Yeah. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's how to tap into the unconscious, because our consciousness is actually not real. And then also about how we love to sabotage ourselves. And so when you're talking about that, I was like, wow, I think there's a reason that we had to reschedule a couple of times to get to this moment. And that's awesome. Yeah. So, man, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Talking about your business card, right? Is where can people connect with you and learn more about you and your company?
Angus Nelson is available on all the search engines. It'll take you to me. There's not many Angus Nelsons on the globe, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me, ask me any questions. If you want to know about, some of the programs we have and things we do, feel free to reach out. And lastly, I would say this, we are far more powerful and capable than we give ourselves credit for. And the biggest piece that if you could take away anything in anything I said, and I use it in the context of how leadership needs to give permission to other people, I would also say, as you, the listener, whatever you're doing, mowing the lawn, listening to this podcast, or if you're washing the dishes, or if you're in the car dropping off the kids, you need to give yourself permission to fall in love with yourself, permission to embrace your power, permission to decide what you want and not require any reason to defend it. As I said, all of this is going to be contingent on your ability to manage, self-regulate, to stay on top of your emotional, psychological, and nervous system. This is something you have control over, and no one can take that away from you. And the more intentional you get to protect that, to grow that, to dial into that, the more powerful you will be for your future, and the more impact you'll have to everyone you come in contact with.
Man, Angus, thank you so much for sharing your insights on really mastering the human edge, right, in our AI-driven sales future that we're stepping into. So I really appreciate you joining the show today and dropping some knowledge bombs on us. To the listeners, thank you for listening, Mixology. We will see you next time, where we continue to explore perfect blend of go-to-market strategy, sales excellence, and AI. Thanks a lot.